to the June 14th, 2023 Board of Directors meeting, and we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And Kristen, will you take roll call? Yes. Division 1. Here. Division 2. Here. Division 3. Here. Division 4. Here. Division 5. Here. Okay, we are now going to have public comment for items not on the agenda. And if you have any members of the public want to speak, please come to the podium and state your name. And I would just remind you that there's a 3-minute limit for public comment. Thank you.
Good morning. Ari, public. So this is the first time I'm here, second time I get to talk. Last time was 2 weeks ago. So the 3-minute slot did not really work for the purpose of discussing 2 miles of complex facilities on my property. I did leave you with a couple of thoughts, and have not heard back about either, which I am not completely surprised about. So I'm here to request that we will discuss facilities running on our property as an agenda item.
Okay, we'll take that under consideration.
Okay. So last time we took 2 issues that I brought up into consideration, and there was no response. So I'm going to take it into consideration in the rest of the times that I have.
Sure. Yeah, you have another 2 minutes.
Yeah, no, I'd like to discuss when would be the opportunity to put it on the agenda.
I'm not at liberty to, I set the agenda with Vice President Johansson and the General Manager. And what I would like to suggest is that we get back to you. I assure you, management will get back to you.
So this time you will get back to me?
Yes.
And
not me personally, but management will get back to you.
And shall we say within 5 days? Does that sound fair?
Fair? Yeah.
Thank you very much. Is that fair, Greg?
That's fair.
Okay. Thank you, Ari. Any other members of the public would like to make a comment? Okay, we see none. So moving on to special orders. Not sure what this is.
This is here, I'll go ahead and open this, Madam President, if you want me to. This is an item that was brought forth to the district by Mr. Dom? Lindars. Yeah. Dom has written a book on the ditches and the canals within Nevada City, and he's here to give a quick presentation to the board as just a member of the public and a public service announcement. So,
thank you.
Got the floor for Mr. Dom.
Good morning. So my name is Dom Lindars. I'm a local historian, and I've come here to actually present you with a copy of the book. So this is for NID to share. Unfortunately, due to the production costs, I would love to be able to give each of you one of those, but if I can, I'll start with that. Yes, thank you.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
A benefit of, wow,
wow,
this thing weighs like 40 pounds.
So if someone wants to buy this book,
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
where?
So it's available at local bookstores, both in Nevada City and Grass Valley, and it's also available on Amazon as well.
Nice.
So just wanted to, you have an important day ahead of you, so I don't need to spend too long, but as Keena and I were just discussing, this is a little bit of a labor of love for me. But this is about our local history here, but it's specifically to include not just things about people, the families, the miners, but the engineering, and really answers the question, how did the water get here? And so if you take a look at this, this is a map of our area here, Nevada City, up to Scotts Flat, and the blue lines here indicate the current, just a small fraction of NID's current canal network. But then if you take a look at this, this is about half of the 800 miles or so of old mining ditches that predate NID. And so if you want, what the book gets into really is the history of a lot of these. So the book talks about 100 of these most significant ditches, including, for example, the construction of the South Yuba Canal, which is still, still provides the main source of water for the district. But a lot of the other significant canals and ditches that tell the history going back to 1850. And so just getting into taking a look here, a lot about the mining techniques and construction techniques for building flumes and building the ditches going back to 1850. But also specifically, this is about for all of the community and wherever somebody lives, there is history around you. And so detailing the history going back to not just Nevada City itself, Grass Valley, but Willow Valley, Gold Flats, Selby Flats, Rough and Ready, all of these different areas that had water, brought to them all the way going back to 1850. And in fact, it was April 7th this year was the 170th anniversary of probably one of the most significant water rights that NID still holds. So that was founded by the Snow Mountain Water Company in April 7th, 1853, by Daniel Rich and Justice Fordyce. Fordyce as in a lake that you may have heard of. And and that water rights details pulling water from Rock Creek, Deer Creek, and bringing it down to Nevada City. And then a year later, they actually also staked a claim for South Yuba water that led to the South Yuba Canal and its construction starting in 1855 and taking about 3 years to complete. So just wanted to share a few stories. For example, Scotts Flat. There was a Scot. His name was Fraser MacLeod, and he was born in 1820 in Scotland. And he was a miner in Gold Hill. He actually ran one of the ditches for water in Gold Hill. The Gold Hill is there are lots of Gold Hills around here. The Gold Hill is up by White Cloud near Alpha. And the people around the town didn't like him very much because he charged too much for the water. So apparently his house burned down. I say burned down because who knows why a house might burn down then. But he then moved down to the area that became Scotts Flat, where he had a ranch, and he later owned a hotel in Grass Valley. So Fraser MacLeod. So you want to think about Scotts Flat? Yep, it was actually a Scot. So it's the next one. So just a few other photos. One of the things that I've really enjoyed over the last few years is actually out dog walking around the county, taking photos of some of our beautiful county, but also many of the lakes and canals and flumes and ditches that we have out there, and that's part of what's in the book that sort of includes that. And so with that, I just want to say thank you very much for a quick opportunity to say hello, and my thanks to Greg and to Jennifer for their support for this, and also Susan in the PR team helping to connect me with some of the photos. For example, there's one of the Scotts Flat construction dam up in the book. And also, many of you probably know Ken Hart. Ken, as the unofficial historian at NID, actually helped set me on this journey got me interested in some things many years ago. So, with that, I'd like to thank you very much, and I hope you get to share the book around some of the NID employees, and it's a resource for you guys to take a look at.
Thank you, Don.
Thank you.
I have a question for you. what were a couple of the biggest surprises that when you did this exploration? And one other question is, how long has it taken you to put together this beautiful history of this, of our area? It's a wonderful contribution.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I've been researching about 6 or 7 years, and it was about 3 years of writing. So technically, I started 2 months before COVID hit, but needless to say, it became a pandemic project.
Good for you.
So in terms of surprises, I think one of the things that for me is that the story of the South Yuba Canal Company, which we have. About half of the original NID assets came from the South Yuba Canal Company. That ended up being more of surprisingly, a story of greed and power, because it was really their monopoly that powered them through in terms of just getting control of the Deer Creek Basin. And so specifically, they provided water into miners in the Nevada City area. But they had various upstarts that tried to actually, that dared challenge them by building their own ditches to provide water into Nevada City. And the lengths to which this company and the group of individuals went to actually put them out of business and destroy them personally in view of getting rid of their competing ditches, up to including the fact that the South Yuba Canal was a project that started with a sort of a pipe dream that started in 1852, even though it didn't actually start construction until 1855. But it was actually another company's idea that was stolen by what became South Yuba Canal Company. And they also pretty much stole the water right as well. It was adjudicated in court to not be the case, of course, so don't worry, your water rights are safe. But in all intents and purposes, for those of you who know the path of the South Yuba Canal, there's only one way you can get water from the South Yuba to Nevada City, and it's through Bear Valley Gap. And so really staking a claim there and actually running water through there. And so really, the surprise was just how they went about consolidating their power and helping to, and their monopoly really led on through the 1870s and 1880s, right up until PG&E's acquisition of the assets that actually led them to be able to drive hydroelectric power, which obviously led to another monopoly that we still see today.
Fascinating. Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Yeah, Don, the canals that used to go through Graniteville, do you write much about them?
Oh, I'm afraid not. I stuck to I stuck myself just to Nevada City. Even getting into talking about the Grass Valley ditches, the book would have been twice as big. So I'm afraid going up to the Middle Yuba would have been a whole nother book. Because there are hundreds of miles of ditches up there.
Is that a future project?
I'm not sure. I think my wife might, before I'm allowed to start that.
I'm wondering with the ditches of Lincoln coming up.
Yeah.
There you go. That's right. Perhaps a project for another time.
Well, thank you
Wow.
so much.
Thank you.
Congratulations on a wonderful accomplishment.
Very good. Thank you so much. Really appreciate your time.
Yeah.
Yes.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Don.
Thank you so much.
Job well done.
It's a couple pages longer than the NID book that we published a few years ago, which is awesome.
Okay, moving on to the consent agenda.
I have one question.
Okay.
So, in the last plan for water, we asked those drawings, the legends, to be updated.
Mhm.
I haven't seen anything, and it's not in the minutes.
Okay, so.
I don't know if it's being worked on, but the public actually came up to me afterwards, and they want copies. Actual work.
The new legends.
Came outside. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Right, I think the request was clear, and I think the consultant said that they would go back and update those, but it's not reflected in the minutes,
It's
you're
not in
saying?
the minutes, no, I'm okay with that.
Okay.
I'm gonna trust that you're following up,
We will definitely follow up with the consultant.
then I'm good.
Okay.
You want to make a motion?
Well, wait, go ahead.
I would like to pull 4F, though.
Okay,
Okay. And Madam President, I would like to please pull 4H.
And I'd like to move that we approve the consent agenda, removing 4F and 4H for consideration.
I'll second.
Any public comment on?
I second, yeah.
Any public comment on the consent agenda? I see no public comment, so we'll take a vote.
Division 1,
Yes.
Division 2,
Yes.
Division 4,
Yes.
Division 5,
Yes.
Division 3.
Aye. Okay, item 4F.
Yeah, so Greg, I'm just looking for a little bit of, this is the first time I've, seen something like this, just an understanding of the process.
Yeah, maybe we can have Sandra come up as well. Sandra's our finance director. This is a action that the district takes every year around this time in June in order to give the authority to the county in order to put these tax levy rolls on the tax rolls. So this is sort of, district's been doing this, I think, ever since the Rodeo Flat and Cement Hill, our CFDs have been in place, right? 2008. Say 10 or 15.
This isn't us authorizing any new taxes,
No.
just the next year.
It's just the next year authorization to let the county know that these should be placed, that these taxes should be placed on the tax roll.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's what
Yeah, and so it happens every June because we have to get it to the county before they take it for approval. And their tax roll is in July, right? So we have to do it in June, they take it in July. And so you'll see on the next board meeting, there's gonna be another item, but it's, not related specific to Rodeo Hill or Cement Flat. It's actually gonna be coming from the water team. And so part of what the district does is delinquent bills, if they're unpaid, they can also be put on the tax roll and, taken, levied through that process instead of doing the whole collections process. So, yeah, these are both routine, items each year. And if you looked at the detailed reports, basically, both of these are just a very minor change over last year, less than $100. So they're very consistent each year.
Okay.
And there's two of them.
Yeah, and there's
4Es, same,
4E and 4F are the,
Rodeo Flat and Cement Hill. It's kind of routine every year.
This is backwards. I'll second your motion.
Yeah, so I move to adopt, 4F Assessment District Number 2008-1, Rodeo Flat Special Assessment fiscal year 2023 and 24.
Second.
Any public comment on item 4F? Seeing no public comment, take a vote.
Division 1,
Yes.
Division 2,
Yes.
Division 4,
Yes.
Division 5,
Yes.
Division 3.
Thank you.
Okay, Rick,
hang out for the next one.
Yeah, thank you, Madam President. I pulled 4H in part because I believe that we had some, again, direction to staff last time that we looked at our budget to actual, to not be on our consent agenda. And my general, and I think the discussion was, gosh, as a board, we have very few responsibilities. The biggest one, in my opinion, is fiscal oversight. And so to just have this on the consent, I think, does not allow for, discussion and public interaction and so on. So I would really make the request that each time that these come to us, it would be on the regular agenda. You can tell I'm still not fully here. But that said, I also wanted to say, I thought this was an excellent report, and I want to thank staff. It was well done, and I don't have any issues with the report itself. I think, it's much better than prior reports that we've had, the process is getting, you can tell it's getting more and more streamlined, better and better.
Understandable.
Yeah, understandable, right, so thank you.
Thank you.
But we'll take your requests and duly noted, and I'll let the general manager know that we'll move it from the
Well, I don't know,
consent.
I don't know what I recall the rest of the board was saying that we wanted to.
I think that was I seem to recall the
Okay.
request.
Great.
Yeah, and I can.
Fair.
For that? I mean, we have board consensus on that.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Okay, And so with that, I would move to receive and file the budget to actual report for funding year 2023, quarter one.
I actually had a couple of questions.
Oh, okay, we'll go.
So we can still, wait, I'm gonna second it, then we can
We
still
can
have.
still have
All right,
discussion.
thank
Okay.
you. Okay, so there's account number 40411 on page 13. It just says summer outside and winter outside water sales. And I'm wondering about that. Who are we, because then it separately talks about Nevada City, Grass Valley sales. So I'm wondering who those outside sales are to.
And I'm sorry, what page was that on?
13.
And that,
So we,
Summer outside,
So basically what those, good morning, Board.
Good morning.
Chair, Underwater Operations, let me reset for a second. So basically what those are referencing is the customer class categories. So we have our inside district customers, raw water customers, and outside district raw water customers. That's what that's reflecting. Is that one line item for summer inside are our summer raw water inside district customers, and then the other line item is our summer outside district raw water customers. It's a multitude of all of those customers, so,
I get that.
okay.
that's Nevada City, Grass Valley.
No, Grass Valley is in the
Oh,
next
accounted for
one.
differently.
Yeah.
So we have, off the top of my head, I don't have the number, we have a number of folks that, it's roughly, I think, 300 plus, that are outside our district that receive our raw water. Some of them are in exclusionary islands, so in other words, they're internal to our exterior boundary, but they're not considered inside district. And then we also have a handful of folks that are outside our exterior boundary that also receive our raw water.
So the majority of them are within the district boundaries.
if you recall, when we did an annexation just recently for Placer County unincorporated lands, we annexed roughly 65 parcels. About 20 of those 65 parcels have raw water service. Then they've just had it well in advance of the time that the district stopped the sale of water to boundary or to island properties outside the district, which happened around 2004, something like that. So they were just grandfathered in.
Okay. And then,
Good questions, referring to that. Like this. They pay a surcharge, but they do not pay property taxes.
Correct.
And if we do not declare a surplus,
They are not, to receive water. So we have to have excess water available.
gotcha.
okay, that was my other question. So, and on the winter outside sales, are those the individuals who have homes on our raw water?
It doesn't necessarily mean they have homes. It definitely means they're getting winter service, whether it's for agricultural needs or for stock water or things like that. It could be any one of those things. Generally speaking, wintertime customers, though, a great majority of them are constructing conveyance. They use it for some in-home usage, some minimal in-home usage.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Not part of the budget, but is there some way we can get a list of, or not a list of the names or properties, but where are these people located?
We know where they are. We
Yeah.
have all the details.
No, I know you do.
We track them every year. I'm not sure that the board wants to get into that level of minutia of individual customer names, but, we certainly.
No, I don't care about the names.
Okay.
So that is
Concentration of failed wells or reasons why they do not have potable water.
Aren't they mostly historical?
It's really historical.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
It's really about the growth of the county, and the transition from raw water to treated water happened in the populous areas, but it never happened out in the remote areas, and so these folks have just always had ditch water and always relied upon it. That's really what it.
Okay, and your municipalities, county, cities supplied treated water, we did wherever it was feasible.
Correct.
Yeah.
And to his point, those people that are not on the tax roll, they opted out when the district was formed, I assume?
Correct.
All of them did, or most of them did at that time?
Basically, they all did at that time. If they were in exclusionary islands, they elected not to be. Now, I will tell you, obviously, the demographics of the county were very different at that point in time. where you had giant parcels. So one person could have been excluded, and at the time it was one person, but as things subdivided and got smaller and smaller, now it looks like all these parcels are in an exclusionary island. Well, it's because at the time it was one person. Anyway, we are working on cleaning most of those up, so we're really making progress on that.
I would add, I think it's difficult to do some correlation between a winter water user and a failing well. I don't think we have the expertise or the information to make that causation correlation. So I think it's down a hole we don't necessarily want to go, but like Chip says, we do know who all these individuals are and where they're located, but for whatever reason.
Yeah, we're the surface water authority, not the groundwater.
That's correct.
Understood. I guess my point is, it's getting more costly to service winter water, and that will be coming up in the 218 process.
I have, I'm gonna narrowly ask this question because it's not really related to the budget, but it did come up this past week. For the annexation that just happened, does a letter go out to everyone or to those impacted?
Both.
Both. So the people being annexed in get a letter,
That's correct.
and then everyone else in the district gets a letter?
People that got annexed in received a letter directly from NID. They also receive a letter directly from LAFCO once it's going to hearing. The property is within 300. Sure. And then the properties within 300 feet of the boundary line also receive a letter
Can I get a
from
copy of
LAFCO.
that letter?
I can find that.
I just have some constituents that said, hey, I got a letter from LAFCO that my water is being stolen.
I've talked to many.
I was like, no.
I've over the last 2 months, I've spoken with a lot of those individuals in that area.
I can cross a couple off your list. if you
Sure.
give me those letters.
I'll find those letters and
Thank you.
get those over to you.
So when we annexed that property, there was also a cost share agreement on taxes with the county of Placer.
Yeah.
And that was in June that we would spend $500,000,
Which has been done.
Yeah.
which we've done.
We've
Yeah.
done, we did it and finished it, I think, in 18 or something, 19. It was to upgrade the Government Center,
Yeah, basically the line up Willow Valley.
Yeah.
First Street.
Placer County Government Center.
I had a couple other questions.
We'd be disappointed on the budget if you did.
Yeah. On page 15, there are rents and leases and gravel and mineral leases. And I wondered if the rents and leases, is that totally bare Centennial Dam related properties, or is that beyond, do we have rent beyond that?
So I probably need to get back to you on the details of that, but the district has about 30 to 40 leases, I believe, because we have to do the annual report.
We turn on the mic, please, thanks. No? Thanks.
About that. The district has about 30 to 40 different leases. There's gravel leases, there's the Centennial property leases,
Cell tower leases.
cell tower leases, so it could be
Yeah.
any of those.
And then, we had the sale of timber, $101,000. So I was just curious, was this part of?
So that was a,
Scott's Flat.
we budgeted $100,000. We have not received any yet. We did not do any timber sales last year. We anticipated to do $100,000 worth of timber sales around the Scotts Flat area, but other priorities came up. We were just never able to get around to doing the timber sales. So that's why there's still a balance left in that particular line item, and there's a 0 on receivables.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And then I did have one last. On the gravel and mineral leases, $35,000, where is that activity taking place?
That is mostly at Combi. That is our agreement with Green Vista Land Holdings. They took over the lease from Chevron, so that's the gravel pit at Combi Reservoir. So there is a royalty payment that we receive on an annual basis from them, and then a minimum royalty payment over the years. That was on hold when we did the Combi sediment removal project, because we did not allow them to utilize certain portions of NID property, so that royalty payment was on hold, but since they now submit those payments to us on an annual basis, they give us their total aggregate removed, and then we have a royalty agreement with them that's been in place since 2002. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much, and great work.
Thank you.
Do we have any public comment on item 4H? Seeing none, we will take a vote.
Division 1,
Yes.
Division 2,
Yes.
Division 4,
Yes.
Division 5,
Yes. One
See. Okay, so we have the budget policy update.
Sandra's back. Yeah.
So, good morning again. So we're bringing forward, some revisions to the budget policy, and we thought it would be a good time since we're kicking off the budget for 2024. So I'll just highlight a few changes that we did. We changed the name from Budget Amendment Authority Levels to just something more comprehensive, just budget policy. And then really what we tried to focus on was just some clarification and adding some definitions, both for staff and the board. So we defined, you know, the difference between an amendment and a transfer. And then we added under budget development and review, some GFOA, Government Finance Officers Association, best practices. And so those two are ongoing expenses should be covered by ongoing revenues, and one-time or short-term revenues will be used to fund one-time or short-term expenses. So we just really want to align with best practices and add some clarity. We also pointed out and mentioned in this policy the reserve policy and the capital policy and the procurement policy. And we are aware that both the reserve policy and the procurement policy are also going to be under revision. It's just good practice to have it in here pointing to those policies. And with that, if you have any other questions or anything you would like to revise?
I have a question, and I did talk with Jennifer about this yesterday. She's not feeling well. But specifically about policy 3080, that's one that I know has been under revision for a long time. And when I went back and looked at it, it was, you know, still from 2018 with all kinds of crazy stuff in it that we all had agreed that was going to be removed. So the question is, are we able to approve this new budget policy 3100 with, you know, referencing as an example 3080, which has not yet been finalized?
Yeah. That 3080 is still the policy of the district currently.
I know, but it is not something, like, all budget expenditures must be made consistent with the provisions of the district's procurement policy number 3080. Well, no. I mean, that's simple.
You want that changed at the same time?
Well, I'm asking, you know, procedurally.
Step-by-step wise, sure.
Yeah, step by step, because I know that 3080 is a revision, I know it, you guys are working on it.
But, so this is mostly, I mean, that is a small portion of this overall budget policy adjustment. The current policy that we have regarding budget policy, is woefully undervalued. It's just a subset of the overall budget policy. So in general, the policy itself, 3100, should be adjusted. It references a few different additional policies that we're working on that will be amended in the future at some point. I think it's still okay we still want this full policy approved and moved and changed, because the current budget policy, as we're moving to this year's current budget cycle, has no structure around it. So that's a more important system to get corrected now, while referencing the procurement policy, knowing that we're coming back to adjust it. And I think that it's enough.
I would add, maybe, Greg, you can add the details, Jennifer certainly could.
Yeah.
But you as a board have adopted, for example, in your currently adopted budget, some guardrails on the exercise of the authority, policy 38. So specifically around the budget amendment authority, that no longer exists, even though it's in.
Yeah, see, that's my problem, is it's conflicting.
It's been overridden by other board actions. So,
Okay,
yeah, it's superseded, yes.
okay, as long as that's the case, that was why I brought it up.
You as a board have made already operationally some amendments to 3080. What we as staff need to do is comprehensively go through that and present it to you. And I know that's on staff's to-do list.
Yeah, I know it is too.
But this is the foundation.
Correct.
This is
And you're
first.
not approving today, this is just a workshop item. So
Okay.
I think, we could receive your input and then bring it back at the right time. I don't know where we're at on the 3080. I know,
Yeah, I'm not positive where we're at.
yeah. So I can't say if we could trail it, have the two put together or not, but the answer to your question is you can adopt this independently of the revisions to 3080.
When I spoke with Jen yesterday, she said, that, 3080 was gonna be a few more months before that was kind of complete, and, which is fine. And she said, but we do need this policy, 3100, moved forward for the purposes that you just outlined for the overall budget. So I'm comfortable with that as long as I'm hearing that we do have these other guardrails. Do we need to reference, like 3080 is just horrible the way it sits. And I went back and looked at it and read it. It hasn't changed, it hasn't been amended since 2018. So, if we were to adopt this, would we want to have a note that says 3080 to be?
It's already changed.
No, 3080 is not changed.
No, it hasn't through our
You have
amendment.
already, so first of all, in practice, through other board action, there have been revisions in
Okay.
effect to 38. Also, you as a board have already provided direction to make changes to 3080. So I think everything is in place. I think
Okay.
we just need to follow through and make sure it gets done. It sounds like Jen said would you think 2 or 3 months?
Yeah, she said a couple months. Yeah.
And
I know I reviewed a copy a number of months ago, and I had a number of revisions, so I'm probably partly to blame there, but.
Well, it's okay, it's like, as long as staff, you got the direction, you say we have guardrails.
they know what to do.
Yeah, you know what's going on and what to do. I just wanted to bring that up as a conflicting.
When is this coming back to us?
I would like it to come back under consent next time if we didn't have any other
2 weeks.
changes. Yeah.
I have a couple of comments or questions. On page 2, it says the budget will be developed based upon the strategic priorities identified by the board. How are those strategic priorities determined? So is it a board discussion, or is it that you look at the CIP and from that you develop the budget? I mean, is there any conversation with the board to say where, because historically there haven't been. We get a budget and that's it, and we do have a CIP review in advance of that. And I'm just wondering, is that the only nexus between how investments are made, or is there any additional conversation with the board?
Question.
We have a
That would be
strategic plan,
A strategic,
and we already have our ranking for the CIP.
yeah,
So that's different than saying, we're gonna put $5 million a year into that or the other, or we're gonna put $250,000 into gauging stations. That is different than.
I think,
because
Director Holt,
those are high level.
that could be a good request of Jennifer, to be honest with you. I think when the strategic plan was passed, the general manager got the direction from the board to carry out the strategic plan, right? And so the general manager has the authorization to carry those priorities into the fiscal year budget. So, how that information is transferred as to what that priority level for the budgetary number is gonna be, how it's communicated back to the board, I don't know that off the top of my head. Whether that's a conversation, we do have a series of internal staff meetings in advance of the first time that the draft CIP or the draft operational budget comes to the board for workshop or review or discussion. My assumption is there's additional conversations between certainly the president and vice president, but I don't know that full exposure at this point. I think it's a good question, and I think Jennifer would be happy to enumerate on that when she's back next.
Are you referencing the actual dollar amount of discussion? Because we do get the budget with a dollar amount.
But it's already kind of,
That's what I mean.
there's no choice. I mean,
Right.
Yeah.
because everything's about choice when it comes to investment. And so, I certainly would respect what management's view is in terms of where priorities should be placed. But it also seems like the board should understand what trade-offs are being made and what, you know, how does the decision come about rather than just get a line item in a budget and we don't know.
That
what
could
the
be,
trade-off is.
and that could be an easy add-on, just saying we could do this, but we can't do that.
I just would like to have the conversation before.
I agree.
But we do have the CIP with all the rankings.
Yeah, but it's operational budget, I think you're getting at too, not just the CIP. And
Right.
even within the CIP, internally, we're having discussions with operations, maintenance, hydro, about if this was priority 4 months ago, is it still priority
Right,
in the
how those
next 6
shift
months?
around.
Or is it gonna shift?
Exactly.
And then why is it gonna shift? And then what you're requesting, I think, is how do you get the insight then before it comes to you at the final stage?
Right.
As, here it is, take it or leave it, or else we gotta go back and spend another 2 months. And it's November.
Budget workshops that,
Yeah.
before we adopt, and
Mhm.
so, I mean,
We
it
do.
seems like that would be the place where those discussions could happen.
But historically, I mean, we get the budget in, gosh,
I think it's different.
We have a workshop.
I think we outlined what
October, November.
The board approval date this year is tentative for November 8th. So we are trying to do it a little bit earlier than normal. So we're wrapping up the audit, and really that's what we want to do, right? We want to complete the audit so we can start with the good, you know, accurate fund balances. Wrap that up, kick into budget, and, you know, give a little wiggle room.
So
This
that's
is a
November, although we are planning in September to
Yeah.
bring these back to the board for the first workshop sessions. So there are a couple months in advance. Our goal is not to bring them in the second week of December and say, here it is, we must have it done
Exactly.
now, right?
That has
So-
happened to us before.
It has happened.
Has it not, or-
It has happened, yeah. And so the idea here with, when Sandra came on board and as Jennifer continues to adjust financial packages and how we do it, there's a much more strict budget timeline this year, and it's pretty well defined.
It's a refreshing change and
It is a
improvement.
refreshing change.
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
But we'll definitely ensure that message is passed on, that there's some, you're concerned about, I think your concern is well taken.
well, it's just, you know, I just think to be making rational decisions, you have to have the thought process that management had when they made the proposals they made, so.
But the budget workshop will reveal all that, if we ask the right questions.
Yes. So I'm wondering, though, where do we have, reflect here that there's a budget workshop?
In the policy?
The
You want
policy says, prior to adoption, will conduct workshops to receive public input on the proposed expenditures. So.
Put a
is there-
timeline
There's a timeline. It's not in the policy, though.
But would it be worth
by the end of September.
putting that by, you know, because, I mean, I do feel like we all as a board got, I mean, we had to approve that budget for second week in December, or we would fall into a pit.
So we have the workshop by the end of September.
Yeah, or we provide some kind,
October
yeah,
1st.
some kind of framework of,
Yeah.
so that we don't, I mean, I really appreciate that is clearly the direction management wants to take, voluntarily, independent of the board. But I still feel a little trauma from the past of holy cow, I mean, you're brand new on the board, okay, approve one of the primary, pieces of our work, and it's,
Yeah, and so typically, we wouldn't want to put a specific date in this policy, which is why the board, or the, excuse me, the district brings to you the budget calendar annually. And so maybe in here, we can, you know, reword something to reference that budget calendar at the beginning.
So can you elaborate on that? How would you bring the budget calendar to the board?
So the budget calendar, when did we bring it this year? I believe it was April or March. We bring it early on, right? And so it says budget kickoff is going to be June 6th. And it has the deadlines all the way out to the final, which this year is November 8th tentatively. So early on, we're kind of letting you know when all those workshops are gonna happen. If that's something you would be okay with, just, you know, noting that in this policy? Okay.
That's doable. Bring the budget calendar
yeah, that's fine.
as an additional bullet point.
Yeah.
Okay. We can-
Actually, done.
Thank you.
No more questions on that?
But you have to say,
You're not going anywhere.
I'm still here?
well, you know, on
How you doing?
3100, I actually did have a question on that, because if I read 3100, well, I mean, it's got the same definition, it seems to almost a complete repeat of, oh, I see, this is an old one.
Yeah,
Sorry.
and I didn't redline it because the whole thing would have been redlined, so.
I was like, what are we doing?
It's a complete redo
Yeah.
of 3100.
Yeah, sorry.
The old one is in the back.
My bad, sorry.
So can I just summarize where we're at? Karen, I heard your question on the priorities. Staff will address that and respond at the next meeting. We're gonna add probably to the first, add a new first bullet to 3100 for, referencing budget calendar. Anything that we've missed? Otherwise, we'll bring it back
Yeah, perfect.
for approval.
Nice, good questions.
All doable.
Chip? Do we have any public comment on policy 3100 vision? Being none, we move to Chip.
All right. Good morning again, everybody. Today, I appear before you with a workshop item for the proposed modification of the Water Operations Management Assistant to an Administrative Analyst position. If you guys all recall some of the resolutions you've passed in the recent past, one of them was for Pam Robinson, our 17-year management assistant water operations. She retired. So happy for her. We miss her. But anytime you have one of these major changes inside the department, it's a good time to reflect, review, and see if the structure you have still meets your needs, or if there's opportunities for efficiencies, and that's what we did in this particular scenario. So we looked at the management assistant position, and really it has seen some changes in the last 5 to 8 years. In the past, water operations has had a branch of customer service housed within it in the dispatching position. We used to get a lot of calls. Basically, any call related to raw water concerns or questions would come into operations. The dispatchers would take the call, see if they could answer it, and assist in that regard. We had one dispatcher at that point in time, and we got a lot of calls. So the management assistant would a lot of times fill in and take that overflow on, so she was very busy on the phone answering those calls, along with all the other duties that they were completing. A few years back, we changed the structure. We took the dispatch, we added another one and put it strictly in customer service, so now they're all housed in one umbrella, which is way more efficient and it works well. But that allowed more time for the management assistant to not be on the phone and do other things, which is great. Now, in combination with those changes, we've had a ton of changes in the regulatory environment and water operations specifically. some of those things, I can just highlight a few. So water rights, for example, we used to report those on all 58 of our water rights every 3 years. Now we're doing it annually. And in fact, during the drought, we were doing it monthly. And we were doing this without any additional staff. Just a huge burden on our water resources team. Another example, our water treatment division, they are doing monthly reports to the state of every drop of water we produce, the water quality behind it, and all the numbers. We're reporting that monthly, and then added to that are the ever-increasing water quality sampling that they're putting on us. And so that's a whole new program that has been added to what we do, and really we need some help and assistance and oversight and regulatory reporting for that. Another big item, the lead and copper rule changed recently. I think we can thank Flint, Michigan for that one. But basically what it requires is NID to have a library and inventory of every single treated water service line we have, what it's made out of, when it was installed, and we have to know what's on the other side, the customer side. It's a very daunting task. We have to have this done by October of '24. So another giant program that we've been asked, or we are required to do regulatorily, that we don't really have the staff to handle. We haven't asked for new staff. And in talking with Jennifer in our coming budgets, don't ask for staff. So we're trying to get creative and finding ways that we can become more efficient, provide some more help, and utilize the folks we have. And I think this management assistant position was a great opportunity to take some of those regulatory responsibilities, push them down to the management assistant level, and they can really help out with some of that. And now is a great time to do it because the position is empty. Having said that, though, the additional duties don't really fit in the management assistant box, and I think are better reflected in an administrative analyst position. And that's why we're here today, is to hopefully get the support to change that position from an MA to an administrative analyst. Financially, it doesn't really hurt the district immediately because the pay kind of overlaps as you're starting out. So in other words, the management assistant that we had was maxed out. She was at the top rank. If we change this to an administrative analyst, I foresee we'll probably bring it in at one of the lower levels, and so there'll be an overlap in budget that won't cost us any extra. But the administrative analyst position actually is kind of a career ladder type position, and it has 3 different levels. It's a 1, a 2, and a senior. When you compare those 3 levels maxed out to an MA maxed out, it is a difference in budget of about $22,000. So not pocket change, but the additional benefit we will get in helping with this regulatory requirements, I think is great, and is definitely a lot cheaper than adding a FTE.
You need this to do your job,
Yeah, absolutely.
and it's not gonna cost us that much more. Do you have anyone in mind?
We don't. I am very hopeful that we will fly this and get lots of internal interest. So we have a lot of great employees in here that I think could step up and do this position. So, but we won't know until we fly.
Yeah. And the penalties for not complying are much greater than this.
That's a good point. I never like to look at it that way because I try not to be on the negative side, but that's a great point.
Risk management.
Yeah.
The current FTE is leaving?
She is retired.
Retired?
Yes, she retired June 1st.
So it's open.
It has been open, yeah. I've been, the whole team has been stepping up to try to cover while we have the little gap, so. That's one thing I didn't bring up, is the administrative analyst, if it's accepted and adopted, will continue to do some of the MA-type duties like the time cards and tracking budget to actuals. All that will remain in place, but we're gonna add some additional regulatory steps to that position.
A new reg, is this the state or federal?
It's a little of both, believe it or not, yeah. So the water rights stuff is state, the lead and copper is fed. It just keeps coming.
Yeah.
Job security, though, I mean, what the heck?
Somebody.
Yeah.
I support this.
Thank you.
I do too.
Yeah, appreciate that. So with that, I mean, are there any other additional questions or concerns? If there are none, I will take this back It was a workshop level item. I believe the, full-time positions, the authorization of comes back to the board, or is it just general manager?
Yeah. I think it would be consent.
Okay, very good. Thank you for the clarification. Don't do this very often.
Yeah, you have our vote of support.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any public comment on change? None?
One quick question before. Water supply? How would, I mean,
It's
2
full.
months into the
It's full.
irrigation
Everything's
season, and we're full.
I tell you.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, we're doing really good. Basically still managing the gates on the reservoirs to keep them from spilling.
It's amazing. Good job.
Thanks.
We're gonna take a 5-minute recess and we'll reconvene at, 10 o'clock sharp. Have a wonderful presentation on vegetation control program, and welcome Jason. And I'm not sure, Greg, if you wanna introduce this at all, or Steve? Or just have Jason come right on up.
Good morning, Board. This is Steve Crosser, Director of Maintenance. It's my pleasure to introduce Jason Carroll. He's lead of our vegetation control program. One of the reasons we want to bring this workshop forward is prior to the pandemic, the NID was looking towards moving forward with programs to find and utilize alternative methods for vegetation control. Due to some staffing issues and the pandemic, kind of went on the back burner. And now that we've somewhat stabilized and can start looking forward again, we wanted to bring a quick update to the board on our current program, some of the methods that we're using currently to reduce the use of herbicides within our district's properties or our assets, and then some programs we're looking to restart and move forward with. So again, I wanted to introduce Jason Carroll, and he'll be providing you with the presentation.
Thank you, Steve.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
So, looking forward to it. We have done a few things here as the couple years pass. So as we kind of get started, kind of go through this fairly quickly. Some of the old stuff. There we go. So we'll go through an overview, results from previous studies, earlier plans, some of the changes of what we've done over the last couple of years, the aquatic needs we kind of face, what we're looking to do. Oh, that probably helps too. Current method controls and some future goals. So in our previous studies, and these date back from 2017, they had a few pieces of equipment that they were trialing that I have kind of gone through the numbers and don't think they're really going to be feasible for us. So the weed blaster, they'd used a walnut shell blaster in the trial. It has some merit to it, but as far as for what we can use on the canal, it takes about over 2,000 pounds to manage about an acre of weeds per application. Going down a lot of our canals, we're running side-by-sides. We don't really have a way to carry that kind of weight, and then also deal with the leftover materials that would end up probably down in the water into people's boxes. It does have a lot of merit in ag. They use it with fertilizers. If you can see the piece of equipment there, they direct the fertilizer down along the row lines, and that way it not only kills or hurts the weeds, but it also fertilizes the plants that they're dealing with.
Jason, I'm not
Sure.
familiar with a weed blaster.
Sure, it's basically like a sandblaster. So, yeah, and they trialed it with walnut shells, it'd be a natural organic type material that
Walnut
was,
shell is what's being blasted instead of sand.
that's what we trialed it with.
Ground up.
Mm-hmm. So,
Works in ag.
yeah, it has actually pretty good merit in ag because they can mix different materials.
What's the advantage of, why would you do that?
The nice thing about it is fire safety. So when you're out mowing, you have a chance of hitting rocks, sparking up. There's no chance of it. You're basically shooting granules into the ground on the weeds. Basically, it destroys the weeds as they come up. Works pretty well as long as the weeds are fairly short, early stage growth. Once they get taller, then you have to either weed whack, mow it down, and go back through and reapply. How often it works or how often you'd have to do it, yeah, I would assume until you get control once a month, especially during the busy growing season. For our biggest problem weeds, which are usually the aquatic ones that run along the bank and the water's edge, have to be at least once a month.
So for the new guy here,
Sure.
what is your envelope that you're treating? Is it like so many feet on each side of the bank of a ditch?
So we basically do the bank edge, water's edge up to what we'd call the bank, and then the flat ground, which would be our access roads, we call it the berm. So depending on the canal, it could be anywhere from 3 to 4 feet wide up to 12, where you need to get vehicles down on some bigger canal.
So the main issue, I think you said, Art said, is the side of the canal leaking.
Yeah, you'd end up with all that material. Either if it would hold on the bank, that'd be fine, but more than likely, at least half of it's gonna end up down in the canal.
Good for cattle along the canal to be good.
Oh, that's coming up, don't worry.
There's no weeds in our canal.
Can you just comment on, you said it's not cost effective?
So, not that it's cost effective, it's more that the feasibility of running thousands of pounds of granules or walnut shells along our canal system. In the picture, you can see it, they're using a pretty heavy-duty tractor to haul.
Right.
We're hauling with a side-by-side on the bulk of our canals. Even with a 1,000-pound rating, once you include in the weight of the machine, everything else, we'd be having to stop every hour, and it just, to refill, they'd have to drive back to a loading station. Coming from the middle of nowhere, there's nowhere to really do it except maybe our biggest canals. But I don't know if it's worth investing the amount of money into doing it to control along the big canal.
Top of the canal.
Yes.
It's unstable.
Once you run out of that
You have to start.
material, you have to go back
Yes.
to the source, wherever it is, a mile back, up and around, and then come back to that same spot and move forward, so you're just spending a lot of time moving back and forth.
So, our wars are one.
Yeah.
Supply chain.
Yes. So the logistics of it are more,
And it's not safe on canals.
it'd be iffy, especially on the big, small ones.
Can I ask a question?
Sure, Mike,
It's a
can you?
workshop, so it's wide open.
Yeah, step to the post.
Mike Pasner, Indian Springs Organic Farm. Good morning. Are walnut hulls free?
I haven't looked in to see if we can get them for free. I would assume if people were trying to get rid of them, possibly, depending on the time of the year,
Or you can get paid for hauling them, or have them haul them to you?
possibly.
Are you in favor of using walnuts? You have experience with this? I do not have a lot. It does seem like they would eventually become compost on the ditch banks, on the berm anyways. Still be a good idea. I can see where you can send a 1-yard tractor to feed the equipment that's blasting and keep up if it takes an hour. You can go back and forth and keep up without much danger, because they're running equipment down those ditch banks all the time, at least mine and many others. Might be feasible, I'm not sure.
Yeah, that'd be looking at like a lot of the bigger canals where you can run
Yeah,
that kind of equipment on. Mm-hmm. Was there any other questions on? The next one was the weed steamer. So this one they trialed out, it pretty much just uses steam to damage the plants. Again, has to work during when the plants are early stage, low growth. Uses quite a bit of water. We had looked into getting a unit built and talking with the reps. They gave us numbers on how much water it would take to manage an acre, and they were looking at over 600 gallons an acre per application. Again, it'd probably be at least once a month. Just based on the amount of water to use, I don't know if it'd be feasible to run it. With the equipment as well, the tank setup is about 600 pounds, So you're talking about either a tractor or pretty good-sized truck to haul, plus another 600 gallons of water, which you'd be filling from the canal. So in time, I don't know that it'd be feasible. Maybe to control just along the small banks, but again, the investment, the equipment was well over $30,000 just for the base unit. So we kind of stopped looking at that for now.
What did it use for fuel? Burn?
Diesel and gas,
So, yeah.
It's on-demand steam.
yes.
If you were gonna do something like this, the widespread in the district, would you need like 10 of these things to make it feasible, or like, are we talking about?
They said it could get about probably 2 to 3 acres maybe done in a day. So it's about half of what we can do with the current spray team. So to trial it out, it'd be worth a see.
4 to 6 acres today with the spray team? Okay,
Yeah,
that's
for one spray team.
But you're only doing what, 8 feet at a time, 6 feet strips?
Yeah, with the spray team, or just with this?
No, with
With
the
this.
steamer.
With the steamer, we trialed it out with just a 2-foot head.
Yeah.
So to have a full unit built, it's a custom make.
So is it 44,000 some odd square feet in an acre divided by 2? Would give you the linear.
Yep.
Okay. Then also, my experience is that if you get weeds like this, it kills them right away. You get weeds like this,
Yes.
they're sitting there for quite a while.
It's all about the timing.
Yeah.
It's all about timing, keeping on it. So with our growth season, it'd be again once, probably every month, at least to get to the weeds before they get over a few inches tall.
And the spray team runs how many times a month?
We will hit one canal 2 to 3 times a year usually. Smaller canals that have more pressure, we may go in a 4th time. But in the bigger ones that can hold the pressure, twice.
What's the return rate or regrowth rate that weed blaster steamer was?
They were seeing regrowth within usually a few weeks on the trial. They were starting to see growth come back.
That was more than the weed blaster return.
Both about the same, because you're pretty much just killing off the top weeds. The steamer, they showed maybe a little bit longer, but the weed blaster, you didn't get any surface penetration. So you're still dealing with the current seed bank.
Jason, I have a question.
Sure.
So for all of these methods, I'm wondering if some might be better on some of the larger canals and some might be appropriate or not appropriate. You know, it seems to be the size of the canal, the size of the berm, right? So it seems to me there could be a mix of what we do depending on the size of the canals and the berms that we're working on. Is that
Yes,
true?
the problem is the logistics of getting the equipment down there. So the side-by-sides, our weight ratings on it are about 1,500 pounds max. So if you're throwing on a 600-pound tank on it on top of the water, which 100 gallons, you're already at 1,000 pounds.
Right, okay.
To do that on the smaller canals, even though that'd be the best place to actually apply it, logistically, I don't know if it's gonna be time effective. Because if you run equipment that'd be small enough to go down it, you're gonna be stopping to refill, reload, start over.
The other thing I wanted to ask is, some of the canals that are up at higher in elevation, probably, I'm assuming they have a different weed profile, say, than the ones like on the Tar, or some of these ones that are down in Lincoln area. Is that true?
Yes, the higher elevation, especially up above Nevada City,
Right.
We don't even usually do much spraying, maybe once a year, once every 2 years.
Huh.
They have a lot of-
I was gonna guess that was true, but thank you for.
Yeah, they have a lot of tree cover, a lot of pine trees, the leaf litter helps control the weed pressure. So bulk of our spraying will start from Nevada City down, and we spend a lot of time down in Lincoln, Auburn, and kind of middle ground. And the next one, they did trial out some cover crops. The unfortunate part of the cover crop program is they didn't come up with a management program. It was install it, see how it would help control the current weed pressure. And unfortunately, everything just turned into one giant weed mat, which actually ended up being harder for us to control. So,
Mike, you might, thought that whole trial was cut short also.
yeah, it stopped right at pretty much about 2017 when they ended the program. It was,
But there was also other recommendations coming forward that would have made the weed control better,
it,
with the subterranean clovers.
yes, it would have. I never saw them, so I don't know whatever happened to them. I don't know if when the trial stopped, they just,
The advisors were not rehired.
yep, something like that.
Okay. But I
It's
think
interesting,
two of them at least have some information still.
Okay.
just toured Peaks, and 2 generations ago, they planted clover cover crop orchard, and it comes back every year.
Mm-hmm.
They have like almost no weeds. It's pretty impressive.
Okay.
I don't know how well it works around water, but it works really well in that orchard.
Yeah, and if you have the information, I'd love to see it.
I can put you in touch with the people.
Sure. The,
It's irrigated in the orchard.
yeah,
I got it in my orchard.
Mhm.
You run clover? On the ditch on the bank, yeah, I have clover in a lot of my orchards. That's cool.
So that's the difference you're saying, is that on the banks, we would not be irrigating it.
Yeah, the banks and the berms don't get irrigated.
Right, they don't get
You could
irrigated.
just kill off the clover.
Yeah, but you gotta, yeah, but you also realize that you're looking for the suppression in the springtime.
Yeah.
And that's when they are being,
Well, it's so hard down
irrigated.
in Lincoln and Auburn, because like this year, it jumped up because the weather pattern.
The rain.
So fast.
Yes.
That, like, you would need to spray and then come do one of these other things, is like maintenance.
yeah, or integrate a program where you're gonna try and
Oh.
facilitate the growth of that, but it's hard to do.
I still think that the clover has some possibilities.
Yeah, especially would help manage along the water's edge, because that's our biggest problem, is getting the grasses to grow 2-3 feet in the summertime. That can help manage them before the clover would die off, or if it would be
If
moist enough to
clover
keep
dies
it.
off, it already suppressed the weed
Mm-hmm,
growth, yeah. It comes back.
yeah. So it'd be more finding the right crop for it to do. So they also did a trial on the organic herbicides. So these are a list of the ones that they trialed. So the biggest things that I have with them, if you look at the signal words, and if they're, according to the label, safe around water.
What a signal word
So
mean?
the signal word is the toxicity to the applicator.
Okay.
Caution being the safest, warning being middle ground, and danger being the most dangerous.
And even with caution, you're still bunny suited up?
Most of the caution labels are gonna be long sleeve, gloves, long pants, safety glasses,
Operator?
no respirators. Some will, none of the ones we do currently require. So according to the labels, you look at the safe around water, most of the ones they trialed are not allowed on the water's edge. Finding ones that are cost efficient by themselves is pretty hard. You can look at the cost per acre. Those are based off the label rates and the costs currently right now. So the high one there, the Avenger, that's $800 per acre per application. Most of these are all what are considered contact herbicides. They work about the same as kind of doing the sandblasting or the weed blasting. It'll damage or kill what's there, but it doesn't kill the roots. So if the plants are hardy enough, they'll grow back. In these trials and some other trials I have gone through with the UC system that they've done, they are finding about every 2 to 3 weeks they have to do applications to maintain control. So that would be $800 at least a month per acre to run the heavy ones, $200 to $300 on some of the cheaper ones.
What acres are you managing?
So we currently, on the canal system, have about a little over 400 acres. There's about 450 acres that we oversee everything, but we spray about 400 of them consistently. And then we also do over 100 plus acres between tank sites, hydroelectric sites, and other things. So it's, the last couple of years has grown as we've taken on some more of these other projects. So all in all, we do 500 to almost 600 acres annually.
Money being no object of these organics, what shows the most promise?
The one that worked the best was the weed slayer, down towards the bottom.
I do too, yeah.
Good marketing.
It's a great name, and it actually was one of the better working one, but it lost its organic certification because they found trace amounts of glyphosate and dicot in the mixes.
Gee whiz.
But as far as all the trials, it actually worked, it was one of the better organic when it was trialed as organic. The weed slayer.
So what is working right now in ag is suppress.
Mm-hmm.
And 200 an acre, yeah, it's a little lower than that, but, it is working. It's not available around water, but it can be done if the ditch is dry.
Right.
In the winter.
Does it suppress it, the growth, pre-emergent?
No, the only pre-emergent was opportune coming out from Marone, and that seems to have dropped off the.
Yeah, I still haven't gotten any information as far as if they're even moving forward with it or.
Right.
What you're saying is that you could use suppress on the roads, but not on the.
Well, if they did.
It's only on the dry ditches, so it'd be during the off season.
Yeah. Do you have issues in the off season?
That's when we do our pre-emergence.
Yeah.
So we'll spray along the canals and the berms, to help prevent the weeds from.
Oh, you could use this because the ditch would be dry?
Yep.
I got you.
So we could use it as an alternative that time of year.
Okay.
And then once the ditches become wet again, or if they're run all year, we couldn't use it.
So I'm struck by the number 400 acres on the ditches.
Well, it's,
Out of
Bigger
four,
than that.
huh?
It seems like it would be much larger than that.
we do about 400 miles, and we figure about 8 foot
Yeah,
wide per mile.
it turns out to be 400 acres.
That seems,
It's not much.
what isn't much? It's surprising.
But it's spread out all over.
Yeah.
With suppress, do you have to do repeated
You
reapplication?
do, but not as, people are getting some really good results.
Yeah, that was one that's been trialed by the UC system, and they were seeing about 3 to 4 weeks, no growth before they started having to look at doing a reapplication.
For the first year.
Mhm.
Second
But it's
year,
not safe around water.
then it goes, then I think now you're dealing with a less vigorous weed mass.
Hopefully.
The second year, the third year, and pretty soon, it's gone.
Is it my understanding, is that we can't use it around our canals because it's not safe
If it's
around
wet.
water?
As long as the canals are running water, we couldn't use it. So during the off-season, the canals go dry for cleaning some of them.
Yeah.
They go dry, so we could use it during like the winter.
And you could do it on the berm, away from the water. You're supposed to do that with Roundup anyway.
Could
but-
you really? I mean, wouldn't it, if the rain comes and it just leaches down into the,
Well, it dissipates after
Usually after a couple hours, it's either dry or broken down.
re-entry.
Yeah, and depending on the label, how close it would say to use around water, some of them will say stay a certain feet away from it, or.
Could you elaborate a little bit on this, what is actually happening and why there's restrictions on getting in the water? Because I assume, I'm shocked to see that Roundup has none, because every label I've ever read, spraying pesticides, do not get in the water.
So the Roundup label we use, or all the aquatic herbicides we use are labeled for use on water.
So you can actually spray this in the water. It doesn't affect fish or, how about the guy down the stream?
Not according to the labels.
If you're not pouring,
Placer County wants you to capture for 24 hours.
capture your water and just spray.
Yeah, you basically, like, you got, if it's going into your pond or something, you spray the edge of the pond, you can't spill for 24 hours.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, they say it doesn't hurt the fish. I only do a third of the pond at a time, though, just to give them a chance.
Yeah, a lot of times if you're doing the ponds, especially, they'll say to do it in sections, because when you kill off the weeds, you suck the oxygen out of the water.
Yeah.
And does the university affirm this stuff? I mean, those statistics?
They got some good water products, right? That plus Q-Tree does a pretty good job.
Any further questions on the?
It's one possibility.
Yeah, we still look into it. I'd like to get the program more into it. It's more finding the right product, how often we have to do it, and adjust for budgeting from there on, because these are expensive things.
Yeah.
Especially when you get to the next page, you'll see the cost of what we're looking at comparatively.
But the dollar sign on the back end of $30 per acre for Roundup, but it's 305.
Oh, it tricked you a little bit.
So if we're doing 400 acres, $30 at $12,000 is our budget for Roundup?
Pretty much per one application through the system.
One application?
Yes.
And
So
how many applications?
we'll do anywhere from 2 to 4, through the season.
10 million.
So we go on the next one, the non-organics. So these 7 are some of the primary non-organic products that have aquatic use labels, as in they can be used to treat plants on water. So we can actually spray them. Again, you look at the signal words, most all of them are either caution, there's a couple that are danger. We do not use the danger ones. That's extra personal gear, safety, and the 2,4-D has a very nasty history to it. So, yeah, it's part of something that was really bad. So, yes, so we stay away from it. The next thing you'll look at is the water use setback. So these products, if we use them to treat plants on water, this is the use setback for irrigation water according to the label. So the Roundup and the Imazamox, the first two, do not have one. The Imazamox we use at a label rate that's low enough that it's not required to hold the water. If we use the Imazapure, which is a product we trialed out this year on our tank sites, things that don't have canals, irrigation water associated with them, is 120 days. So if we were to treat the aquatics with that, that means that water wouldn't be able to be used for 120 days. The next one down, the Diquat, that is one we trialed on our berms the last couple of years. It's 5 days if we were to treat it for aquatic use. And then the Triclopyr, that is a product called mostly Garlon, great for broadleaf. We'll use it on blackberries away from canals, at tank sites, stuff like that. 120-day use. The 2,4-D we don't use, and then the flumioxazin, that is actually one of our pre-emergents. We use it in the dry season. So we use it up until about December as a pre-emergent along our banks and berms on dry canals, and that gives it the 120 days before water use. Cost per acre, that is cost per application. The Imazamox is one we're using more of. Its main product is called ClearCast, but it's $110 per application. And further in, we'll get into the efficacy, how well they're working. So we are trialing some of the different products to see how they work along our canals, where we can use them. And any question on that one? Sorry. So the next one is the mowing program. It was one that as I came on was something we were starting to look at to use our current equipment. Due to COVID basically annihilating every stock of stuff and California's air regulations changing, we kind of had to stop looking at it right now, based on the fact we couldn't get the equipment we wanted. Most of the manufacturers for the motors were stopping dealing with California a lot because of the regulations on the motors they were using, and they didn't want to deal with setting out certain motors for the equipment. So we were trying to get a flail mower, which would be heavy duty enough on our canals that if we were to damage it, it would still be operable. The only things we could get access to were blade mowers, which our canals would end up breaking blades and we'd be down 2 days to replace parts or a day to replace parts. So with the current, with the current equipment, besides going to a tractor-based motor, kind of stopped looking at it. We're gonna kind of see how California's air regulations change in this next year, since the whole gas-powered motors and engines are gonna really screw us up a lot. Once we kind of get an idea, yes, that's a better word for it. Once we get an idea how that goes, we can kind of look into other parts or trialing different things to see what kind of mowers we can get into.
We're gonna have battery chargers on our canals.
It's gonna be interesting, yes.
Do you, today, don't, utilize any sort of mowing?
No, we have a small mower that's attached to an excavator they'll use, but it's not one we trial for it. If the areas get bad, we'll usually go through and have to weed eat where we do, or they'll blade the canal.
Many fires have been started by mowers.
Yes.
Probably
So,
the flail mower is a nice idea.
yeah, we had planned on using it.
It's still a concern, but it's better than the blades.
Yeah, no.
Not using ours.
Yeah, our plan was to use it basically through spring, and then once, about this time, it, pretty much through May, and it'd be done.
The flail mower, what was, like, an attachment to the front of a skid steer, or?
Oh, it was attachment to the rear of our side-by-sides. So we'd be able to take,
Drag with its own,
yes,
engine on it?
yep. And that was where the problem with the manufacturers was the motor, the gas motors.
Tractors you can't buy, small engines or.
It was the small engines that we were having issues with. Most of the ones we could find, they wouldn't ship into California. So the one we did find, it was basically, we'll get it to you when we can, and we don't guarantee that it's compliant for you, but we'll send it to you.
So 3-point would work for you?
A 3-point on a tractor would be able to work for us. We looked into it more, but we wanted to see how everything kind of changed, before we just started in on that. Because I want a tractor with that.
Effective on the berms, right?
Only effective on the berms. There is a side trimmer we looked into that would go behind as well. That would give us about a foot off to the side, basically be the top edge of the bank. And the problem with the tractor one is, again, you're looking at the bigger canals, which those are the ones we deal with the least. And you'll kind of see as we go into it, I've got another slide, we'll see that.
And the blades would just, you could spark a fire pretty easily. So maybe, like a DR system with string line?
Yep, that, we had planned on having mounted tanks and everything with a spray gun, just in the case something did spark up, they would have fire us right there.
But the strings wouldn't,
The strings would not.
like a weed eater.
Mm-hmm. The only problem is you break the strings a lot, so you're
Yeah.
replacing strings too. We'll go in, the changes that we put into place the last couple of years, the biggest one is we recalibrated all of our spray systems. By recalibrating, we reduced the amount of water we use per acre, down from almost 100 gallons an acre was what they were spraying with before, to 35 with our spray rates. And we had dropped our boom loads, which is the boom sprayers that go behind, down to 25 gallons an acre, from 50. So we've cut all our uses of water in half, which also reduces some of our herbicide use, because some of them are solution-based, 1%, 2%. So you mix accordingly to how much water you have.
How's the effectivity been?
Good. Yep. So we'll kind of get into that too, but part of that is we stopped spraying on the bigger canals, the opposite banks. So we let them grow more natural, which is why they were using the heavier water loads, so they could maintain both sides. The other thing we've done is an herbicide rotation. So to try and reduce our use of Roundup, we've rotated in some of the other herbicides where we can. That's the Diclot and the Imazamox. And the biggest part for it is the monitoring. I've had one guy, his job has pretty much been run through canals, see where the problems are so we can target those problems rather than let them get out of hand. That's been the biggest thing as far as helping us, and that's both for aquatics and for our terrestrial stuff. The aquatics, knowing where the problems are, means we can either stop the treatment, reduce the treatment amount, or know when we actually have to go with a heavy load to control stuff. And as you'll see in the numbers, if you haven't yet, that's made an impact on our actual yearly use. And then the last part is bank naturalization, whereas we maintain the access road and we leave the bank edge green, just let it grow. There's a picture of that coming up too. So the results of the changes, so you can see the uses from 2019, 20, 21, and 22. Data I have most of, about from 2018 through 2020 was about 1,000 gallons of glyphosate a year. Our first trial where we rotated in during the summertime and started doing our calibrations brought it down to 690 gallons a year. Last year, with our full recalibrations and a good rotation, we got it down to 386 gallons.
That's really impressive.
Yes, so that was the big push for me, was to see how we could do, how effective it would be by rotating everything.
And were you still getting the same effectiveness, do you think?
About 90%.
It's a little woolly out there, but.
Yeah, it's manageable.
Yeah.
So kind of setting a threshold of where we need to maintain it.
What works, what doesn't,
Yep.
doesn't need to be.
Yep. And every canal is different, unfortunately. It's not, every canal is the same, depending on the size of the canal, the flows. But knowing where that's at and being able to see it, that's the monitoring part there. And then you look at the total copper, you'll see we're usually right around that 6,500 to 7,000 gallons per year. By being able to target or even cancel shots, because our treatment, our copper schedule is set before the year begins, so everybody is aware of if they get a mailing notification, and we don't change that through the year. So once it's set, we usually treat it. By knowing where we need to treat or where we don't need to treat, we've been able to reduce that by over 1,000 gallons per year. And that copper is about $30 a gallon, so it's actually a pretty significant savings. The goal for this year is to see if we can maintain that and still keep control.
That's an elemental copper.
Yes. That's the Couturine Plus and the Nautique. And then here are some of the results of what we've had from some of the alternatives for the glyphosate. The Dicot we found does really well on the broadleaf weeds, but is terrible on grasses. The Imazamox does about 70% control on both, but it had a really hard time on the aquatic grasses. The Imazapyr, these are the ones, that's one we use in our tank sites, did fantastic. It's also cost effective as compared to the Roundup, about 90%.
$5 a gallon?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's not bad, but it's, again, we can't use it on the irrigation water because of the setback. The flumioxazin, that one's about 70% control, but you have to catch them in early stage. If you don't, then it's too late. And then here's a few pictures of what we are trying to control. All of these pictures were taken in the last 2 weeks, just before I put this together. The picture on the left is the Newtown Canal. The one in the middle is the Campfire West. They had a blow up of algae 2 weeks ago when the weather turned and the water warmed up. Yes, they were cleaning that about every hour to 2 hours off that middle picture.
Oh, my.
And one on the right, that is the lateral 4. That blew up on that same weekend to the point where everybody was out cleaning their boxes 2, 3, 4 times. Yep. That canal is about this wide, about 2 feet wide. So you can see the algae in there. It's only a few inches deep. So once it loads up, it just... So methods of control, some pros, cons, biological, chemical, cultural, mechanical. Each has their good and bads. The biological, it's great to have animals out on it, but it's hard to keep them under control. In the water's fine. It's keeping them out of people's yards, keeping them in
Out of their gardens.
yes. And the other problem, we don't use them in the treatment plants anymore because the feces carry bacteria and problems. So we stay away from there. Chemical, we tend to get longer control. It's usually more cost effective, but it's introducing man-made products to the environment. Cultural, this is a big one we're going to try and push. It's non-invasive, it's natural controls. Problem is it's expensive. You're basically looking at rebuilding canal shapes to make the flow better. Water flow makes it easier to control vegetation, which means less applications of herbicides.
Walk work on tar ditch, looks nice.
Yeah, and
it's working.
Yeah, we've even stopped treating it as much as we have in the last 20 years. We're doing it one week less, and if it holds that way, we may look in the next year going even one more week less.
So what was the fix?
They rebuilt the canal. They put a bunch of rock in and reshaped the canal.
Quarter mile, half mile?
As a test.
It was just falling apart.
It just needed to be
And slowing
reshaped.
down. And the grasses were growing, so they just rocked it.
Okay.
Yep.
Beautiful job.
They did a great job. The water's flowing great, and it's helped us out a lot as far as what we need to do to maintain it. So keeping that is kind of key.
There's more rock out there.
That's a bigger project there. The last one's mechanical. That's gonna be weed eaters, tractors, mowers. Minimum use of herbicides, but they tend to be more expensive, slower, got emissions and also fire danger to deal with. See if we can kind of speed up for you guys here. Cultural, that's gonna be improving the canal shape. Canal shape affects the flow, like I said. The flow helps affect the weed pressure of the aquatics. And then leaving more canal banks natural. We're playing around with that on some of our bigger canals that can handle the weed pressure. It'll come up in one of the next ones. So chemical, we on the right, we do still use a copper solution to treat the algae and the weeds. In the middle, you can see one of our guys, Brian, he's spraying the weeds along the bank edge. You can see where our pre-emergence held really well along the berm, where he's walking and where they're driving. But the weeds in there on the edge will grow up 2-3 feet tall if we let that go.
On the left, you're applying with the drone?
So this year, we hired out a company, Clean Lakes Inc. They do a lot of work, especially up in Wildwood and stuff. They have a drone program that they can fly along. We use them on our hydroelectric dams, where instead of sending bodies down to go spray the dams, they sprayed it with a drone.
Oh.
So cost effective, it's a little more expensive than sending the bodies, but having no rolled ankles or one person, makes up for that real quick. Yeah, and they use this system down a lot in the valley on big canals that they don't have access to. And they're finding actually pretty good results with it. They run off a GPS program, so they map it, they GPS it, and they tell it where to go, and it follows its GPS.
Does it avoid people? What if somebody?
Will stop.
Will stop?
So if it senses something out of the ordinary, it just stops.
Fish.
This thing's pretty active. They were rocks about the size of the chair that if it didn't recognize what it was, it would stop and wait for the person to override. It would just shut down. Even power lines, poles, stuff like that, it weeks out on those. I almost hit it with the drone, videoing it, and it stopped and beeped at the guy. The biological, the goats. So the goats are great. We'd love to have them in. Again, the problem is keeping them penned in. The guys who run them will use wire fencing, electric fencing to keep them in areas. Keeping them in small areas is too hard because they push each other around and they'll push through fencing.
Recent legislation made it very difficult to pay.
Yeah, I heard about that too. That's gonna be interesting.
AB 5 basically made it factor. Guys running goats.
Really?
Overtime.
Was it specific to
Basically-
goat folks, or was
Well,
it
there's
just
a
an independent
very
contract?
specific piece of legislation about.
Livestock.
Actually, I think it's about sheep, but it.
I'll be sure.
Yeah. It gotta stay. Patterson and some other guys are trying to rectify the situation, but basically those guys are living out with the goats, so they said, well, you're there 24 hours, you gotta pay them for 24 hours.
$120,000 to $30,000 a year.
Yeah.
Whereas before, we were making enough money we were getting paid everything, sending money to home, support their families. Several goat companies here have gone out of business or reduced their herds to a point where they're not leaving their own ranches.
Yeah.
Fortunate.
This is our legislature at work. They talk about wildland fire out the other, it's destroying the goat, or, wild eradication by goat business.
Didn't we, Steve, I know that we did, the one project that I know that you and I talked about out, off Lake Vera. And we used the goats there around that old dam site. And so there are places where it is more appropriate. I can see how it'd be real hard to control them on these narrow little canals.
Yeah, we currently use them in some of our reservoir sites.
Yes.
Recently, historically, we've done them in two, oh, sorry.
No, that's fine. No, I was gonna say, Jason, explain more. We're trying to expand it. So we are looking every place we possibly can to use them as the alternative method for control. So they are definitely beneficial in certain areas.
In certain areas, right, I get
But
it.
the cost is just gonna skyrocket.
It is?
Yep.
Is it?
Yeah, it's gonna get worse.
Oh, because you have to pay the,
Yeah,
Yeah.
and the dog, who's always out there,
oh, that's right.
I'm not getting any more.
T-bone steak.
So our next method, mechanical? Yes. That's why on that one picture there, that was a friendly goat that actually came up and
Oh, yeah.
hung around me the whole time I walked the area after
I
that.
used to have goats to do this on my property.
But you're petting him and he's not working.
Taking a break.
The problem is, then there was other animals that would come and attack the goats, so I ended up giving up my goat
Yeah.
dream.
So the mechanical method you see there, weed eaters, whenever we do the weed eating projects, it'll come up on a little bit. We also have to have people in there working and cleaning out the canal so it doesn't plug up. So it's not just a single operation. It's kind of a group thing that has to be done. The mechanical, the tractors there, they work great on certain types of vegetation. Certain types they're not as effective on. And that has to do more with like aquatic weeds versus aquatic algae. So we did trial out a couple canals, one, the Livingston Canal down in Auburn. We only take care of the weeds on that with an excavator through the year, and we have to go in about once or twice a year. It's about 1.3 miles that we do. Takes a single operator about a day. 2/3 of that is cleaning with the excavator, and then the other third of that is usually about him cleaning up the mess that comes through. That's gonna be going through screens, other boxes and stuff. And so time-wise, it's fairly effective. That canal doesn't see much pressure from algae, that's why it works. The weeds grow a little slower, take longer to come back, so we can usually maintain it with 1 or 2 times in there a year.
So the 1.3 miles, that trends 7 hours, yada, yada. How much total cost for that project?
Total cost, so I didn't include what the cost would be for the equipment. I don't know what our daily equipment cost would be. Manpower-wise, probably about $600 a day for one body.
How many?
One. It's probably about $600 a day-ish,
Okay, plus the equipment.
plus the equipment cost.
Maybe 1,500,
15 to 2, somewhere in there. You got truck costs, equipment costs, gas, everything else.
a little more than 100, so a little more than $1,000 per mile.
Yeah, for that canal. And that's specifically because of the weed pressure that it gets. Again, it's not the algae. If it was algae, we'd have to be out there a lot more.
You'd have to do it twice sometimes.
Yep. The other one we did as a manual control is we do the portion of the Newtown School of the Arts, completely by weed eaters and manpower. We'll go in one at a time, well, actually 2 to 3 times a year, once in the summer, once in the winter, and sometimes in between if it needs. We send in a 6-person team. It takes them a whole day usually to get through it. This year, they got through about 0.8 miles, so we still have to go back out. Total cost on that, you're probably looking $4,000 or so for a day on it. That also includes hooks working out, cleaning the canal, making sure things don't plug up, back up.
So they sold some land to someone who's doing some grading. Did that impact that portion of the canal?
Not for us.
Okay.
Yeah. We still do property end to property end on it, and they get through the whole thing fine. The only thing that,
It wasn't that, I mean, I heard it was quite significant.
I think it was up above,
Yeah,
so.
okay.
Goats for fire fuels reduction. We are up to 40 acres this year, plus. We're gonna have them in the Union Reservoir starting probably next week. And then they're gonna move into the Rex Reservoir, Cunningham, Sugarloaf, and then up into the Snow Mountain, the old treatment plant area, which is all tank storage now. Previously, it was about 4 acres, so we're hoping to see how effective it is and see if we can grow it down to the Auburn area, because we have contractors that bid from Auburn all the way up to Nevada City, to give us estimates on it. Where we can use them, keeping them in the reservoirs and stuff. Where we can't, again, canal system's really hard, just too small, too hard logistically to keep them in there. They did trial it, I guess, a few years ago, and the contractor said he'll never do it again. So it just didn't work out.
Herding cats.
Yeah.
Hey, what is the cost per acre for?
So the bigger the projects, the cheaper they get.
Sure.
So if we have them go in for a 1 acre thing, about $1,500. Go in and do more, you get down to $1,000. So natural bank management, so this is an area on the tar, just above North Auburn's Road. So you can see we maintain the access road, but we've left the bank green. The tar is big enough, wide enough that it can handle the weed pressure. So we're trialing it out to see how it works. Hopefully it'll help with bank stability as well. Bare ground, you get erosion. Keeping it green, we don't have to spray as often, and we don't have to worry about it falling apart, hopefully. So this is the first year we kind of run through it. We're doing it there and on a couple canals in Auburn on the Doties to see how it holds, because they are all DG and they fall apart every year. The drone technology, kind of already hit on that, so we'll just, unless anyone has questions on it. We are hoping to build a program in-house, so it'll save us money from having the contractors are very expensive to do it. So get the licensing, get the program in-house so we can take care of the big dams.
Practice in the middle of my pond. You're gonna have a raffle for whoever's the drone operator?
We already know who'll be starting. And then we'll go from there to see if it stays effective and is worth building a new program.
And so this also, drone can be used for social media, yada, yada?
Yep.
Dam inspection?
Dam inspections. Keane's very excited about it. So we'll hope to build a program in.
I thought you did.
Yeah, engineering uses them for flyovers of before projects, et cetera. So that one's special.
How many drone operators or?
We have two,
Yes.
well, two licensed?
2 licensed. We're working on setting up a couple guys in our program to get through the full licensing, because to do the application work, it's licensing through the state, through the FAA, and it's a lot of work. Yeah. And then the last one, the aquatic vegetation. Due to environmental concerns with the copper, we are looking to do alternatives. We're looking to try and get a study going to see what other districts are using, see if they're using herbicides, if they're all doing manual or equipment controls, how their efficacy is. We'd like to kind of rebuild the program. Starting with that, we need the information so we can start in on our permits, which takes 3 to 6 months to get those rebuilt. I don't want to rebuild permits just to go through and rebuild them again the following year. So if we can figure out best ways to go through it that are as environmentally sound as we can make them, that would be the starting point, and rebuild the program from there.
On the copper, do we test the water for?
We do water sampling where the canals integrate with natural systems. So waters of the United States, we do have 3 locations that we water test. In the last, I've got 4 or 5 years worth of records that we're required to keep, and we haven't had one detection of it. And according to the state, we haven't had any issues.
So by the end of the canal, it's all dissipated?
Dissipated or settled, and we've yet to have a detection in natural waters.
What about the settling, the muck underneath?
That's where the environmental concerns are.
Yeah.
So I do a soil sample every couple of years, every year, just to see where we're at. All of the levels of the canals I've tested so far, and I have the data I can give you guys too, come up still on the low, not even barely in the medium end on what California's regulations are for copper into soil.
There's a number to that? What is the number?
I want to say it's along the 300 parts per million or something along those. I'd have to go back and double check it, but ours are all in the 50 to 100, right? So they're still relatively safe. But before things get overused, I'd like to have the alternatives and start actually paying attention to that.
When you clean out a canal, do you have to look at what's in the soil before you dispose of it?
yeah, as far as that goes, there hasn't been any regulation on it or anything that you have to follow, so.
It was interesting. You put copper on fruit trees, and it's great.
Yeah.
Put copper in the water.
And last one, future plans. So I have reached out to the UC system, to try and work on some more trials with them in the area. And then we also started in a aquatics vegetation work group with the Blankenship contractors that we use for our glyphosate study. They put together kind of a small meeting of minds of aquatic vegetation managers to get together like once or twice a year to see what problems there are, what they're doing. Unfortunately, the first one was when it snowed 2 feet and we got snowed in and I didn't get to go. But looking forward into getting them more of that and then pushing for canal reshaping. Sure.
So a lot of individuals, or some, want to maintain to NID standards, the canal that goes through their property. But there's a indemnification clause in the contract that I would need to sign. So, any way to change that? Because my point is this, I'd send guys in there to do that stretch. And if NID would come in and inspect it to the standard, what's the problem?
Question, yes, you can change it, but it's a question of how much risk does the district want?
Well, I assume it's a greater risk not allowing it. Going to have more fire, more pesticide use. Why not?
So
Why not empower?
let me make sure I understand. We have a current no spray agreement, correct, is what the director's referring to. And that, why don't you speak to that? Because you deal with it.
Sure.
Dan.
So the no spray program is there. It's a set up so that the homeowners or landowners maintain the canal based on the specification in there. But there is a insurance clause, which I'm assuming that's what you're talking of?
Yeah, the indemnification that if anything, act of God, then the individual homeowner is responsible for it.
Yes. So they take on the liability for it. That's what the insurance is there for, and that's been a point of concern for a lot of people.
Yeah, and so.
Put it nicely.
Well, stop people
Mhm.
who would otherwise do a representable job of maintaining that part of the canal on their property.
Possibly. You could also have folks that,
Don't.
but then you have, let's use an extreme example. You have somebody that, we have relaxed the agreement, there's no insurance, no indemnity clause, and we allow the homeowner to maintain NID's facility. They do some knuckleheaded thing, and they cause a huge blowout or some very significant event causing liability. The other affected landowners are going to look to NID to remedy that problem.
Yeah,
Yes, they will.
I understand.
Yes, they will.
But if you
Yes,
do
they
some
will.
knucklehead thing, we've inspected it. Gone in there and
What if
said,
they
hey,
take
you
their
did a knucklehead thing,
excavator
you're
and-
responsible anyway. Well, I would put parameters around it, I agree. You don't take an excavator in there, but you do it by hand, by weed eating. I'm really low maintenance, weed eaters, nothing more.
But a lawnmower is the same thing as a weed eater, and I just started the biggest fire this year.
But they're already responsible for that, if they start a fire.
We're not giving them direction on how to maintain that.
But you can't say you maintain you maintain it, you cannot use an excavator, you cannot use.
Currently, it doesn't.
It's in there that they cannot use.
It's cheaper to police it than to do it.
I don't know. You can't police if some knucklehead decides to start weed eating and with a bladed weed eater at 4 o'clock in the afternoon on a 100-degree day. I mean, you know, it's like.
They're already responsible for that. Knucklehead move.
Not if there's no indemnification.
Not if there's, yeah.
No, they started a fire, they're responsible.
Piece of paper, that's all that is.
What's the
Indemnification,
concern?
huh?
What's the concern that you think less people are signing this and then doing the maintenance because
Yeah,
they have to take on all this risk on their own?
yeah. No, the
Pink flag.
indemnification went way beyond just their actions on the canal. They were taking complete ownership of that canal.
Yeah, it's been a couple of years since I've looked at that. We can look at it again.
I'm just a
I mean,
good lawyer, contract if you're on your side.
yeah,
But if you're on the
absolutely.
side that wants to make, you know,
Yeah,
it
my,
sucked.
the last time we looked at this, maybe it's been more than 2 years. It's been a while, but the direction from the board at that time was, these landowners, they don't want the district maintaining their facility on their property. Okay, but in exchange, the district needs to be protected. You, Mr. or Mrs. Landowner, you can do what you like, but here's some safeguards to protect the district. The board can always revisit that, and if there's a different balancing of the risk that the board would like to entertain, you can do that. But you want to be careful.
I would send a crew through to weed eat the whole place. I would not use backhoe, I would not use anything with a blade, and that can be spelled out.
Do we get a pointer to the current clause?
Because indemnification.
Yeah, we'll,
We can send that to you.
we'll send you the current agreement.
The current agreement.
Yeah, I'm
and
curious
we'll talk
about
to-
it, but I would err on the side of protecting the district.
We'll talk internally and we'll see what the.
I'm thinking that we're not protecting the district because we're not engaging the public to be on our side to take responsibility and to do it right. I mean, this could be done.
Maybe we can take maybe we can take staff and take a look at it.
I just want to read it, so I know what it says.
We have it in.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
I haven't seen it for,
Ricky on this one.
haven't seen it
It's,
for years.
it's on the website as well, but if you want, you can
Oh,
always,
if you have a pointer to the website page, that'd be fine.
Yeah,
If it's on
so, I mean.
yeah, it's just under the vegetation part, the
I had
water
district,
vegetation.
One time.
And you scroll down, you'll see it at the bottom.
Canal, you want to,
Come on up.
how good a job was it done?
The district and I have gone around with this for sensitive subject. NID came out and ran a crew of 3 guys for a day, and they managed to do about, I'm thinking 300 foot of ditch. I've got probably 1,500 foot of ditch on my property. That's no way to do large amounts. Backyard where the ditch flows through somebody's property, yeah, let them clean it out. The contract is goofy nuts beyond belief. You should read it. Anybody that signs that has no legal background at all. I mean, who would sign that thing? Having people do it is not necessarily the way. It's NID's ditch, it's their easement, it's their responsibility. It's your responsibility to clean that ditch. We as the public only opposed to using toxic chemicals in what I consider unsafe methods. I have some other questions when it's my turn to ask, but that's, as far as that contract, it's way out of line. You probably could adapt it so that some people could do their backyards. I know many people in town have the ditch flowing through their backyard. We whack it anyways, they just, pay attention to your need for signing a contract.
We can look
How many contracts do we have to do this? Off the top of your head?
Currently, as far as the ones that follow all the protocols, about 5. And we keep up with about another 30 who I try to work with the best I can. By still trying to follow the parameters.
In the past, I remember this discussion years ago, when first on the board, there was a problem policing it,
Mhm.
ensuring that it was happening.
And we have upped our monitoring of them. And that's part of where getting the guides out more just to see and being more talkative. But again, it's still time on getting out there. The ditch tenders will let us know if things are getting out of hand if they can. And then it's getting the people to do it. Most of the time, they're good at, we let them know, hey, you're getting out of control. But there's a few that just,
Then there should be a clause in there, we
Yeah,
go in and
there
clean
should
it
be a
up and charge them.
and there is that in there.
Yeah. I applaud all these methods of reducing our herbicide use, looking for alternatives. Way
Yeah,
to
the
go.
reduction is very impressive.
It is.
In a short period of time.
Yeah.
To hear that, the activity is so good.
Yeah, I have 2 weed eaters that will just chew through
Yeah.
100 feet a day.
Yep.
Mike, you had some additional comments you wanted to make?
Questions, yes? Mike Pasner, Indian Springs Organic Farm, Denver. Tar ditch, parts of it have been armored, your experiments you've done with rocks.
Mhm.
How do you get a excavator in there to clean the bottom of the ditch?
Carefully. They do some damage when they do it, and when it gets bad enough, they're gonna have to go back in and fix it.
So that armoring precludes cleaning with an excavator, pretty much.
Yeah, kind of leave that up to the maintenance guys. I don't deal a whole lot as far as the aquatic cleaning out when they have to go in there. And if they can't get in there, they go in with forks and.
They do go in there and spray around the rocks with Roundup too.
Yes.
Yes, so armoring ditches makes them look pretty, does make for less algae growth, but causes other problems. The board should know that this aquatic herbicides, the coppers, cutrine, and antique, are dripped directly into the water. They just go into the water, they turn the water purple, they run for a day. It is, the district has put the responsibility for that on the farmer, on the rancher, on the landowner to turn off the water, which I think is absolutely wrong. You guys poison the water, we're responsible for turning it off when you poison it. I've not seen a reduction in use of the number of uses for those aquatic herbicides. We actually got increased today, this last year, on the tar ditch, on my section of the tar ditch. That's the futuristic.
Mike, do you have a suggestion of what you would like to see done for algae instead of cutrine plus?
It's not clear cut how to do it, that's why studies need to be done and are being done on it. It's just a matter of what works best for the algae. How can we use less herbicides? I'm glad to see you use less. I'd like to know, one of my questions is, how did you reduce the herbicide use and how will you continue to reduce the herbicide use? Aquatic herbicides.
So the primary way we reduced it, especially with the glyphosate, is reducing the amount we actually spray of water per acre, which that is a mixes of 1.5 to 2% solution per water you use. So every gallon of water, so many ounces has to be used. So by reducing our amount of water spray per acre, we're able to take that reduction of the solution.
Is the berm a water use?
The berm, yes.
It is, because it goes down to.
It depends on which berm. The bigger they are, you have more separation. The small ones, the berm and the bank tend to come into one.
You said one of the ways that you cut down some of them, that you're not spraying.
Correct. Yep.
Yeah,
You can't.
seems like a reasonable idea to me.
And some kind of recalibration, I heard you.
Yes, that was where the recalibration, we reduced the amount of water we're spraying per acre.
Okay.
And which means the amount of solution that we actually have to spray as a percentage drops our herbicide use.
It wasn't like Humboldt County, 20-some years ago, the judge ordered them to reduce their, glyphosate use by half. And they did, but the gallons they were buying was 2 times the potency.
Oh yeah, we didn't change that at all. No, that's the same product.
Gee, they get back on.
How do you think you can further reduce aquatic herbicides? And if you just asked me that, I'm asking you that.
So the first thing is gonna be, as far as reducing just a single one, is trying to get into a rotation. That will immediately drop one, but as far as getting away from herbicides altogether, that's gonna be kind of a canal-based thing, because each canal sees different types of weed pressure. Where we can focus on areas that are primarily weeds, we can maintain them easier with manpower equipment. But where the canals are heavy on algae, the most efficient way to control algae is still herbicides.
That's what I'm thinking, is it the aquatic, algae, because it's in the water, it's actually down
Well, I'm talking about the aquatic weeds too, the pond weeds
Yeah.
and LED. Those ones we can control better, easier with equipment than algae. And not all canals see both. Most will have one or the other or a mix of both. Sometimes you can control one and keep the other down. But sometimes if it's heavy with algae, going in and cleaning it and having the algae come back a week later isn't efficient.
And what's the future of algae reduction, of herbicide reduction for algae?
That's gonna be kind of seen on the study on how other people are doing it. If they're seeing effectivity with equipment or manpower on algae, or if they're saying we can control weeds but not algae, it's gonna be kind of a revamp of the system itself. See what products are out there and what are.
Any chance I could go to the next Blankenship meeting and hear what the state of the algae reduction is?
I can ask.
Okay.
I don't know if they're just keeping it to members or to.
Chris knows how to get in touch with me real well. Thank you.
Hey, Mike, I have a question.
Yeah.
So, as you know, I sprayed a hell of a lot of copper raising peaches in Nevada County. At that time, CCF allowed the use of copper, and they were concerned about the copper buildup in the soil. But as Jason's pointed out, and Barrett bore out, that, not a concern of CCF, I mean, they allowed certification with the use of copper. My question is has that rule changed with CCF or whoever certifying, or these are organic certified, we're talking about? Where do they stand with copper? They're always concerned about the copper buildup in the soil, which we talked about in the ditch. But if it's, what was my question? Is that your primary concern about the copper specifically? When we're talking about algae in the water, and water never had to be tested or shown to certifier what they were using.
You're correct. They're not currently testing, like when NID scoops the muck out of the bottom of the ditch, dumps it on your ditch bank on your property. What's the copper content in there? Nobody's testing that. Could be a potential problem. Sheep are extremely sensitive to copper. A certain amount, even below parts per billion that's legal for humans, can kill a sheep. So it's not a good situation. Copper, which are just like with Roundup, they will see is very toxic stuff. Beginning to see how toxic Roundup is, how it causes different diseases. They'll get there in, 10, 20 years with copper. I'm thinking that we should be in front of that and reduce it. I'm glad to see you are reducing it. And continue to work on the copper, because you're dumping that stuff directly into the water of people's properties. They're then distributing it onto their properties. You're dumping the muck onto their ditch banks. The muck, like I said, nobody's monitoring what the copper content is. You already questioned that and said you did come up with some ratings that were still legal but not good. This is a current problem. Thank you.
I stopped using it.
Have you using copper?
Yeah.
I have a question for Mike or maybe for Jason. When you said, Mike, that NID puts the burden of turning off the water on the homeowner, that's kind of the first I've heard of this. I thought that we sent out letters, put the copper in or the nutrient in, Natique in.
We get a schedule.
Right, everybody gets a schedule,
Yeah,
but why is it on the homeowner?
So there is the option to have a ditch tender do it, but there is a fee that is associated with it. They don't want to pay the fee.
It's costly.
I know it's costly, but they're, our ditch.
And not every ditch, and
I don't know,
Yeah.
it just seemed, that was the first I really understood, or.
we've been doing it for what, 4 years?
4 years. I talked from here, should I go there again?
I think we should go up there, because.
The folks online.
Yeah. Justin, you probably remember this issue really well. Before your time, Ricky, Justin and I have had many encounters over who shuts the ditch water off. Been doing it for 37 years. For the first 33 years, NID, without fail, to their credit, shut my ditch box off, and I turned it back on the next day to make sure that it had been shut off. Situation worked pretty good, reduced labor somewhat. It does cost money. You are applying it to, our water above our property. I'm not independently wealthy, I couldn't take NID to court on that one. It didn't happen, and I think it's wrong. NID is doing that and has continued to do that. That's the situation.
So then I understand, you said your first 33 years, NID came and shut the water off, and then something changed, and now the last 4 years, you've been shutting it off. Is that what?
Timing may not be exactly right, Dustin, you might remember better than I, but.
Yeah.
Is that about right? Why was the change?
Chip's got more background on this.
Well, I know, but I just wondered why it changed.
So from the district's perspective.
Yes.
Mike, right on point. We used to perform this service. What happened is, the request to have the water shut off became more and more, abundant. And basically what it amounted to is that we are then dedicating multiple distribution operators to just go along the canal and shut all of these services off every time we do this application. So we then took a step back and said, look, we don't have the manpower to do this. It's an additional function that folks are asking for that we're the cost of. Instead, not everybody wants this off during these applications. So we will still do it. We're just going to call a service fee. So if you want somebody to come out and shut your specific service off, great, we'll do it. We'll charge you the 1 hour service call fee. That was the solution we came up with. It was a policy that was enacted probably 5-6 years ago now. And that's still in place today, so.
And there, correct me if I'm wrong, Chip, but there were also some instances where some kind of miscommunication happened. You shut off my water, but I didn't want to shut off, and now you've affected me, or
All sides of it.
Yeah, it was every single angle of variance of that, so.
I understand that. Personally, I have a pipe, and I would like it to run through the pipe to clean it out, but that's just me. I would think from the district standpoint, if we say our service ends at the box, wouldn't we want to make sure it was shut off?
I know, I would think so.
There's a multitude of customers who want this water while we're up.
Yeah, I think that I'm just suggesting maybe you want to err the other way. We shut everything off unless you say you don't want it off.
Boy, that would be a daunting task. 400 miles of canal, when we're doing this every week.
Yes, hundreds of thousands of dollars. Okay, so I didn't take.
We do treatments every day, different canals.
Yeah, different canals, not the whole district.
So what is the service fee that we charge?
Oh, off the top of my head, I don't have it. It's pretty expensive, so I think maybe $100 or something. Used to be 60 when we first came up with the policy. Because that's vehicle time, staff, all of that is built into that.
Yeah, I may take a different approach than Mike, but I want to take responsibility if our service ends right at that box, whether that water comes on my property or not, should be my decision. And so I want to know when the copper's going there, we'll shut it off. And I just want that control.
So and that's where we do send out the notification every year at the beginning of the year of the schedule. Jason and our MAs work together real closely on that. We're looking at adding to that program to make sure it's all available online. It is now, but we're trying to emphasize that so folks can make the decision.
And then what do we do, like, the day before? Do we do social media blasts or phone?
We don't, but that's a good suggestion.
Maybe just a little bit more heightened awareness. Something that
Thing hanging on my wall every year.
yeah,
Oh, yeah.
I've never paid attention to that.
Every customer who takes water gets the schedule mailed out.
Yeah, otherwise, how many people would it take for the district to employ to turn off the ditches?
To turn off every box?
Box at one
That's a lot.
Yeah. I'm with you. I want to control it, but that's me. That's everybody. Maybe we can give Mike $5 every time he turns it.
So he'll be out there all night.
Off again.
We're saving the district water.
The label on these chemicals say you should not be using it or allowing it onto your property during use for 24 hours.
Yeah.
Which is part of the situation, part of the discussion we're having. And I used to bother doing it for, like I said, 37 years. It doesn't anymore. Spray crews out there. If You have to cruise with the ATV down the ditch and close the ones that want to be closed. Leaving it open is a liability for NID, you would think, even if you want it open. It's putting it in your pond, and, I wouldn't want that responsibility.
Yeah, I'm kind of on both sides of this.
Yeah.
I agree with what you just said, and then I also want it flowing on my property. I think this is something we should talk about more.
I think you guys are doing a good job.
Thank you.
Okay.
Excellent job.
First, I wanted to say, oh my goodness, thank you, Jason, and thank you, all of your team members to have put this together. I mean, this, you know, Mike has been one of the big drivers from the constituent side and the customer side on this whole issue. And, you know, so I've been, you know, pretty closely following this when we had Amigo Bob do his study, and we, you know, we've done a lot of kind of patchwork, but it feels like it's really come together in a way with you, I guess, your team, your leadership, and I just really want to thank you for that. And to have had the reductions that we got is a big deal. And I'm really impressed and so pleased. You know, I was telling Jennifer yesterday that when I first came on the board, I thought, we just can't use glyphosate anymore, no matter what. You know, I mean, I just sort of had that idea and bias, actually. And then the more I've been here and the more study I've done, I see, you know, there isn't right now a great substitute for it. And, you know, the substitute for it is manual labor, actually, which I have come to understand and appreciate that I did not understand when I first came on board. So, you know, everybody doing their best to reduce the usage is the best way to do it. And so thank you. Thank you, Chip.
The quickest right now and
Yeah.
and very effective.
Thank you.
We'll find another answer.
Hopefully.
Do we have any comments from the, or questions from members of the public online? Jason?
You bet. Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
Okay, I think 5 minutes break,
Yes.
stretch break,
Thank you.
and we'll reconvene at 11.
Thank you so much.
Okay, we are back.
He's got his own fake.
Session. And we're going to have our general manager's report from our general manager.
Good afternoon. No, morning. We're still in morning. I have no report.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And for director reports, why don't we start with you, Chris?
Okay. Last Wednesday, I attended the Nevada County Farm Bureau meeting. Always a good time. Talk about plan for one year. And update things. And then Saturday, I had the opportunity and pleasure to meet our new Congressman, Kevin Kiley, and talk to him about water in California. So that was a positive thing.
Thank you. Trevor?
Turn on my microphone. So I participated in the quarterly Lincoln, Rockland, Roseville Chamber meeting. We had a water panel discussion that was hosted by PCWA.
We saw that.
Yeah, it was
Very
really,
cool.
really good. So, it was myself, PCWA, and the Sites Project. So, learned a lot about sites, which was very interesting.
Great, thank you.
Out of sites.
Ricky?
Hi. Yeah, let's see. Last week, even given my disability here, Karen and I went and did a NID presentation for probably 40, 50 people. And, you know, great questions. It was well received. It's another part of that public education thing that I'm personally really committed to doing. And had a wide range of topics and a lot of engagement and really positive feedback. So that was terrific. And then I do want to bring this up, and maybe this is another discussion item for later, but I had a constituent, and you guys may be aware, that, you know, the bear activity right now, and I don't know why, but it's big. And this person was at Scotts Flat and camping and confronted, or had a bear confront her. And she was saying, NID doesn't have bare trash cans, we don't have bare proof, whatever, food storage. Oh, and so she said, would you guys look into it? So I sent it to Jennifer, and then there was some more discussion from somebody else that said, yeah, why, every other campground in the Sierras has bare trash cans and bare proof, this, that, and the other thing. Why don't you guys have that? And I didn't have a good answer. So I'm just bringing it up as, is this a budget thing?
Problem? Never been a problem. They are expensive. I mean, the amount of snow, I think, up high is why they're down.
I think that's
time at this early in the stage. I don't know the answer.
I never thought about it, actually, until this person brought it to my attention. And I thought, well, that's true. When I go camping, almost every place has bear-proof trash cans and things.
There's an elevation level. I think it's about 4,500 feet, where you're required to above and you're not required to below.
Oh, interesting.
By the CDFW, from what I understand. So that's part of it. That's why we don't necessarily have them at Scott Flat and Rollins.
Do we have them at any of the upper campgrounds?
Yes, we do. We have them at all of
Oh,
I mean, Jackson Meadows, the ones that are, yeah, not dispersed campgrounds, but Jackson Meadows, Fauchery, yes. They are there.
Well, I wanted to just bring this forward and let people think about it, but, yes, it's a problem. Those bears are getting into people's houses. I mean, it's like we're in Tahoe all of a sudden.
Yeah, I do know that at the campgrounds, and I don't think Monica's here, but we do hand out a lot of information. Monica, I don't know if you are on the line, but
she is.
We do hand out information to all of our campers that come there. There's a pamphlet that we talk about. It's bear country. Bear country. Put up your food. Don't leave your food out. I think we find that people, stay up a little late. They may not be, quite coherent as they go to sleep, and chips and cookies and cake and all sorts of things are laying around.
Great, Monica has been muted.
Yeah. Monica, do you want to address that for a second?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Barely.
Just 1 second.
There you go. But now.
Our biggest problem is just people leaving stuff out. We've always had bear activity at Scott's Flat. It's never been an issue. This year, yes, we do have a lot more bear activity just because of this low snow elevation, and the bears are being pushed down our way because we have the food. We do hand out pamphlets at the gatehouses. We have signs at our gatehouses, our bathrooms, our stores. I have a blurb on the website just saying you're in bear country and what you need to do. And I did talk to Fish and Wildlife. They just happened to be here, Ricky, when you sent when that email came out. They were doing a training out on the lake, and they, their thing was that, this is kind of just different year because of the winter that we had. We're never going to get rid of the bears, but we are under that threshold. It's about 4,000 feet that you don't have to have bear boxes. And like I said, our biggest problem is just people that leave things out. We don't have any issues with our garbage cans. I have staff, especially on Fridays and Saturday nights. I have late security that stays here until 2:30 in the morning, making sure that the garbages are empty and that we don't have any issues. So we're not getting our garbage, our stuff is not getting broken into by the bears. It's just whatever the campers are leaving out. Yeah.
So it sounds like this is kind of just an odd year because of the snow, and that since we've not had a problem before.
Well, they've always been there, I think.
Right, they've always been there, but we're doing our job to keep it clean and take care of the trash and so on.
Exactly, yes, we are.
Good. Well, thank you, Monica. Thank you for your addition. I was hoping you'd be here to talk about this.
Nevada City's old teddy bear convention.
So Rich.
Segue right there.
Yeah.
All right. Two things. CPI came out yesterday and 4%. So everybody thinks inflation is coming down, but the core did not move. It's still at 5.3%. So inflation may not be.
The Fed did not raise the interest rates today.
Is that what happened? Today at 11?
Today, yep.
Okay. So they're pausing. The CalPERS, one of my favorite groups, criticized the CEO of Toyota for saying two real obvious things. Some people do not want to give up their gas vehicles, and two, the world's kind of behind on making batteries. CalPERS criticized him for saying this, and the Toyota stock went up 9%. So I guess my point on that is,
What's your point?
Yeah, how to,
we owe CalPERS if they don't meet their quota. And yet they're criticizing a company that went up 9% because of their criticism. Somebody should tell them, we're not gonna be paying these guys for their misstatements and because their investment policies are not trying to maximize the return on investment, they're trying to maximize social governance.
Yes.
And I just find it offensive.
Okay, well, thank you for that. And,
You're welcome. But it costs us money. It costs our customers money for these guys not paying attention to what their mandate is.
Thank you. So I do not have anything to add for my director update, and so we can migrate to the public comment for items to be considered in closed session. Any comments on closed session items?
So I'll just say for the record, Madam President, that two items. One, I do not expect any formal action to be announced following closed session. And second, Director Heck is going to recuse herself for one of the two anticipated litigation items. That's item 9C. So Director Heck at that time during closed session will leave the room and not participate in discussion on that item.
right.
With that, we will close the open session.